Rich boss laughed at his secretary. Seconds later, she responded in 3 languages. Richard Anderson was sweating bullets as he watched the 3 foreign investors enter the meeting room. That $2 million contract could save his consulting firm from its worst crisis in 5 years, but he knew his arrogance and lack of preparation always got in the way of important negotiations. Emily Parker entered quietly, carrying the coffee tray, trying not to draw attention. At 28, she maintained a reserved demeanor that hid far more than met the eye. But at that moment, her only concern was not tripping like she had the week before. "Careful there, Emily," Richard said with a smirk. "We don't want another embarrassing accident in front of important people, do we?" The investors chuckled politely, but Emily felt her face burn with shame. She served the coffee in silence, remembering the promise she'd made to her mother the night before, to endure a few more months at this job until she found something better. "Sorry for the interruption, gentlemen," Richard continued, gesturing toward Emily. "It's hard to find qualified people these days. Some just weren't born to understand the business world, right?" The comment hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She knew every detail of that company better than her boss, had reorganized all the financial reports, and even corrected major errors in past presentations, but always in silence, always without recognition. "Well, gentlemen," Richard said, opening his folder, "let's get straight to it. I know you came from far away to hear our international expansion proposal." The first investor, a middle-aged man with a thick accent, began speaking in French with his colleagues. Richard smiled nervously, pretending to understand, but Emily could see he was completely lost. "Excusez-moi," the Frenchman said, turning to Richard. "Nous avons quelques questions importantes sur votre proposition." Richard kept smiling, but the panic in his eyes was obvious. Emily stayed in the corner of the room, torn between helping and letting him fumble after so many humiliations. Of course," Richard replied, stalling. "Feel free to ask." The second investor, of Asian descent, whispered something in Mandarin to the third, who was American. The situation was growing awkward, and Emily watched Richard lose control of the meeting entirely. That's when she made a decision that would change everything. "Excuse me," Emily said, stepping forward. "Mr. Brown was asking about the details of the expansion proposal, specifically about the markets we're targeting in Europe." The room fell silent. Richard stared at her in shock while the investors exchanged surprised glances. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, back to the story. You speak French?" Richard asked, still disbelieving. "Yes, I do," Emily replied calmly. "And I also understood when Mr. Lee commented in Mandarin that the numbers on page 3 don't make sense, and when Mr. Miller said the projections seem overly optimistic." Richard's expression shifted from surprise to something between anger and humiliation. The investors, however, showed genuine interest for the first time since entering the room. "Miss," the Frenchman said, addressing Emily directly, "vous parlez très bien notre langue. Pouvez-vous nous expliquer ces projections?" "Bien sûr," Emily answered fluently. "The projections are based on a market analysis I prepared myself, but there are indeed a few points that need clarification." Richard was red with anger and shame. He had never imagined that his secretary, the woman he humiliated daily, could speak fluently with international investors. "How did you—" he began, but was interrupted by the Chinese investor. "Ni de fen xi很准确," said Lee, turning to Emily. "你能解释一下第三季度的预测吗?" "Of course," Emily replied without hesitation. 第三季度的预测考虑了市场波动和季节性因素，但我认为我们应该调整一些数字，以反映更现实的情况。 Miller the American laughed in admiration. "This is impressive. You speak Mandarin better than my own translator. What's your background?" Emily took a deep breath. This was the moment she had waited for 2 years, ever since she had taken the job out of desperation. "I graduated in international relations from Columbia University," she said, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I speak 7 languages fluently and have a specialization in international business." The shock on Richard's face was visible. He had hired her after only glancing at her basic resume, never bothering to read beyond her experience as a receptionist. "So why are you working as—" Miller began. "As a secretary," Emily finished with a sad smile. "Because sometimes life forces us to take what we can get, not what we deserve." The tension in the room was palpable. Richard tried to regain control of the situation, but it was too late. The investors were clearly more interested in hearing from Emily than from him. "Look here," Richard said, trying to sound authoritative. "Emily is a good employee, but—" "But nothing," Miller interrupted. "Miss Parker, could you walk us through these financial projections? Because frankly, some numbers don't add up." Emily looked at Richard, silently asking for permission. He stiffly nodded, with no other choice. She walked to the whiteboard and began explaining, switching between English, French, and Portuguese depending on each investor's question. Her presentation was clear, precise, and demonstrated deep knowledge not only of the languages but also of the international market. "Vous avez raison de questionner ces chiffres," she said to Brown. "En réalité, j'ai identifié plusieurs erreurs dans les calculs originaux." With that, she took a marker and began correcting the numbers in Richard's presentation. Each correction revealed incompetence he had tried to hide. "How do you know this?" Richard asked through clenched teeth. "Because I reviewed every report you presented," Emily replied calmly. "I always fixed the mistakes before you submitted them, but this time I didn't have the chance." Richard's embarrassment was complete. The investors exchanged meaningful glances, clearly reconfirming their suspicions about the projections. "Miss Parker," said Lee, 这些修正更准确，你为什么之前没有发言？"因为不是我的位置," Emily replied, "but now I see that silence sometimes does more harm than good." Miller leaned forward, intrigued. "How long have you been working here?" 2 years, Emily answered. "And you've been correcting these reports all along?" Emily hesitated, looking at Richard. She could see the fury in his eyes, but also something else, fear. Fear that his incompetence would be fully exposed. "Yes," she finally said, "among other things." The meeting had completely transformed. The investors now directed all technical questions to Emily, who answered with precision and confidence. Richard remained silent, watching his control of the situation slip away entirely. "Mr. Anderson," Brown eventually said, "nous devons discuter en privé de certain point." The 3 investors stood and left the room to talk in the hallway. Richard and Emily were left alone, a heavy silence between them. "How dare you humiliate me like that?" Richard exploded as soon as the door closed. "I did nothing but correct wrong information," Emily replied, keeping her calm. "You sabotaged my presentation." "I saved your presentation. They already knew the numbers were wrong before I even spoke." Richard walked to the window, running his hands through his hair. "Why did you never tell me you had these qualifications?" "You never asked," Emily said simply. "In 2 years, you never showed any interest in knowing who I really am. Then why did you take this job?" Emily closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the sleepless nights caring for her mother, the medical bills that arrived every month, the desperation of not finding a job in her field. "Because I needed to," she said. "My mother is sick and needs private treatment. The company's health plan is the only thing keeping her alive." The answer caught Richard by surprise. He had painted a picture of Emily as a simple person, without ambitions, but he had never considered she might carry heavy responsibilities. "You could have told me that. And would you have helped me?" Emily asked with a bitter laugh. "Richard, you barely know my last name. Half the time, you call me, 'Hey, you.'" Before he could respond, the door opened and the investors returned. Their expressions were serious, and Richard felt his stomach tighten. "Mr. Anderson," said Mr. Miller, "we need to be direct. We have serious concerns about your company's ability to execute this project." However, Mr. Miller continued, "Miss Parker demonstrated exactly the kind of expertise we're looking for." Mr. Brown nodded. "Nous aimerions faire une proposition différente." "What kind of proposal?" Richard asked, trying to maintain his composure. "We want to offer Miss Parker a consulting contract directly with our companies," said Mr. Miller. "She would coordinate the international expansion as an independent consultant." The shock was instant. Emily felt the floor disappear beneath her feet, while Richard turned completely pale. That's impossible, Richard stammered. Emily works for me. Not anymore, Mr. Miller said calmly. We're offering her a 3-year contract worth $500,000 annually. Emily had to lean on the chair. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. Miss Parker, said Mr. Lee, Ni shuyao shijian kaoluma. Emily began, but her voice failed. You can't do this, Richard exploded. This is employee theft. Actually, said Mr. Miller, we're not stealing anyone. We're offering an opportunity to someone who clearly has been underutilized. Richard looked at Emily with desperation. Emily, think carefully. You have stability here. Benefits. Stability, she repeated, finding her voice again. Richard, you humiliate me every day. You treat me like I'm invisible. And now, when you've discovered I can actually be useful, you want me to stay. I can change. I can give you a promotion, a raise. Combien? Asked Mr. Brown. Richard hesitated. He knew he couldn't compete with the investor's offer. Emily, said Mr. Miller, you don't have to decide now. Take your time to think. Actually, Emily said, surprising everyone, including herself, I have to refuse. The silence in the room was absolute. Refuse? Mr. Miller asked, confused. My mother needs the company's health plan, Emily explained, feeling tears burn her eyes. She's in treatment for a chronic condition. Without the benefits here, I wouldn't be able to keep up with her treatment. Mr. Brown and Mr. Lee quickly spoke in their native languages, while Mr. Miller thought. What if we could arrange health coverage? Mr. Miller asked. Better than what you have now. Emily looked at Richard, who was clearly torn between relief and indignation. I need time to think, she said. Of course, said Mr. Miller. We'll be in New York City for 3 more days. After the investors left, promising to return the next day, Emily and Richard were alone again. Are you really going to leave me? He asked, and for the first time, his voice sounded vulnerable instead of arrogant. I don't know, Emily answered honestly. All my life I've dreamed of an opportunity like this, but my mother... What if I improved her conditions here? Emily stared at him. Richard, in 2 years you never saw me as a human being. Today you found out I could have saved your company dozens of times, but you were too busy humiliating me to notice. I know I was difficult. Difficult? Emily laughed humorlessly. You made me cry in the bathroom more times than I can count. You made me question my worth as a person. You made me believe I was truly good for nothing. Richard lowered his head. For the first time, he was seeing the consequences of his actions. Emily, No, she interrupted. Not now. I need to go home and talk to my mother. She grabbed her purse and left the room, leaving Richard alone with his thoughts and the realization that he had lost much more than an employee. He had lost someone who could have transformed his company. That night, Emily sat beside her mother Margaret's bed, a 62-year-old woman who had been battling rheumatoid arthritis for 5 years. Mom, I need to tell you something, Emily said, holding Margaret's fragile hand. Let me guess, Margaret said with a tired smile. Your boss found another way to humiliate you. Emily told her everything. The meeting, the investors, the offer, her decision to refuse. Sweetheart, Margaret said when Emily finished, you're an idiot. Mom! A beautiful, generous idiot, but still an idiot, Margaret continued. Do you really think I want you to sacrifice your life for me? But Mom, the treatment... Emily, dear, Margaret straightened up in bed with difficulty. I'm 62. I've lived my life, made my mistakes, fulfilled my dreams. You're 28 and wasting your talents because of me. It's not a waste to take care of you. Yes, it is, when it keeps you from flying. Margaret cupped her daughter's face in her hands. Take the offer, sweetheart. And your treatment? We'll figure it out. We always have, haven't we? Emily hugged her mother, feeling the weight of a decision that would change everything. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, continuing. The next day, Emily arrived at the office determined to speak with Mr. Miller and accept the offer. But when she entered Richard's office, she found an unexpected scene. Richard was on the phone speaking hesitant English to someone. When he saw her, he quickly hung up. "Emily, I'm glad you're here," he said, looking nervous. "I need to tell you something." "Richard, I also need—" "No. Let me speak first," he interrupted. "I called Mr. Miller this morning." Emily's heart raced. "What did you say?" "I told him you should accept their offer." Emily was speechless. "And more," Richard continued. "I offered to keep your mother's health insurance for a year as a way to apologize." "Why would you do that?" Richard sighed heavily. "Because last night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything you said, about how I treated you, and I realized you were right. I never saw you as a person, just as a thing there to serve me." Emily slowly sat down. "My father was like that too," Richard continued. "Arrogant, cruel to employees. I always despised him for that, but I became exactly like him." "Richard, no, let me finish." He stood up and walked to the window. "Do you know why my company is bankrupt? Because I push away all the good employees, because I treat poorly the people who could help me. You're not the first talented person I've lost because of my arrogance." Emily remained silent, processing that revelation. "Miller will call you in an hour," said Richard. "He said they secured an international health plan that covers all your mother's treatments at no cost to you." "They did that?" "They did. And there's more." Richard returned to his desk and picked up an envelope. "This is a letter of recommendation. I told them about all the times you corrected my mistakes, about your dedication, about how you saved the company without me even realizing it." Emily took the envelope with trembling hands. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Richard said simply. "And because I wish someone had done this for my sister." "Your sister?" Richard sat down heavily. "She was brilliant. An engineering graduate, spoke 4 languages. But she worked for years in a job that didn't value her talents because she needed to care for our sick father." "What happened to her?" "She died at 35, still working that terrible job, never having had the chance to truly shine." Richard wiped his eyes. "When I see you, I see her, and I don't want you to have the same fate." Emily felt tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know. No one did. I never tell that story." Richard composed himself. "But you deserve to know why I'm doing this." The phone rang. It was Miller. "Miss Parker, we have great news about the health coverage." 30 minutes later, Emily hung up the phone with a 3-year contract, international medical coverage for her mother, and the opportunity to coordinate expansion projects for companies in 5 countries. "So," said Richard, "are you going to accept?" Yes," Emily said, still in disbelief. "I'll accept." "That's wonderful," Richard replied, and for the first time his smile seemed genuine. "You deserve this and so much more." "Richard, No need to thank me," he interrupted. "In fact, I'm the one who should thank you." "Thank me?" "For showing me the kind of person I'd become," he said, "and for giving me the chance to try to be better." 3 months later, Emily was in her new office in downtown New York City, coordinating a video conference with clients from 4 different countries. Her mother was responding well to the new treatment, and for the first time in years, Emily felt professionally fulfilled. "Emily," her assistant said, entering the room. "There's a Richard Anderson in reception. Says he has a scheduled meeting." Emily checked her calendar and found nothing but asked for him to come in. Richard appeared at the door a few minutes later, looking humbler and much thinner than she remembered. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi," Emily replied, gesturing for him to sit. "I didn't know you were coming." "Actually, I don't have a meeting scheduled," he admitted. "I lied to your assistant." "Richard, don't worry. I'm not here to bother you," he said quickly. "I'm here to make a business proposal." Emily raised an eyebrow. "My company is closing," he said bluntly. "After you left, I couldn't keep the clients. I realized you'd been saving my reputation for far longer than I ever imagined." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be," Richard said. "It was a necessary lesson. but I have a proposal for you." He pulled a folder from his bag. "I want to outsource all my remaining clients to you. 5 mid-size companies that need international consulting. It's not much, but it's a start." Emily flipped through the documents. It was a generous contract, essentially transferring all of Richard's contacts to her. "Why would you do this?" "Because these companies deserve someone competent to take care of them," Richard said. "And because I'd like to work for you." "Work for me?" "As an assistant, office boy, whatever you want," he said seriously. "I need to learn how to work properly, to treat people with respect. And I don't know anyone better to teach me that than you." Emily stayed silent for a long moment. "Richard, are you sure about this?" "Absolutely," he said. "Emily, I destroyed my own company out of arrogance. I lost valuable employees, important clients, all because of my ego. I want to learn to do things differently." "And do you think you can work for someone you used to humiliate?" "Honestly, it'll be hard," he admitted. "But that's exactly why I need to do it. I need to learn real humility." Emily considered the offer. Richard's clients would indeed mean significant growth for her fledgling company. "There's one condition," she finally said. "Anything. You'll start as an intern. Minimum wage, no special benefits. If you prove you've truly changed, then we'll talk about a promotion." Richard nodded without hesitation. "I accept. And one more thing," Emily continued. "If I see you mistreating any employee, anyone at all, you're out." "Understood." Emily extended her hand. "Welcome to the team, Richard." He shook her hand, gratitude visible in his eyes. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 6 months later, Emily was reviewing reports when her assistant informed her that Miller had called from London. "Miss Parker," Miller said over the phone, "we have a proposal that might interest you." "I'm listening," Emily replied. "We want to offer you a partnership in our European expansion. It would mean relocating to London for 2 years." Emily felt her heart race. This was an even bigger opportunity than she had imagined. That's incredible," she said. "But I need to think about my mother." "Actually, that's already covered. We've arranged for her to continue her treatment in London with one of the best rheumatologists in Europe." Emily nearly dropped the phone. You did that?" "Your mother called us," Miller said with a smile in his voice. "She's quite persuasive. She insisted we make sure you don't refuse another opportunity because of her." Emily laughed, imagining her mother calling London to sort out her life. "What about my company here? You could keep it running remotely or find someone trustworthy to manage it." Emily looked out her office window and saw Richard meticulously organizing files. Over the past few months, he had completely transformed. He treated every employee with respect, worked hard without complaint, and had become one of the most reliable people in the company. "I think I know exactly who could manage things here," she said. A week later, Emily sat in her office with Richard explaining the London proposal. "You want me to run your company?" he asked, incredulous. "I do," Emily said firmly. "You've proven you've changed. You understand the business, know the clients, and most importantly, you've learned how to treat people right." Richard shook his head. "Emily, this is way more than I deserve." "It's not about what you deserve," she said. "It's about giving you the chance to be the person you've decided to become. What if I mess it all up?" "You won't," Emily said with conviction, "because now you know what it means to lose everything due to arrogance, and you'll never want to go through that again." Richard fell silent for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of the opportunity. "I won't let you down," he finally said. "I know you won't." 2 months later, Emily was at JFK, waiting for her flight to New York City to pick up her mother. She had been chosen to lead an entire international division, with offices in 5 countries. As she waited, she received a message from Richard. "Emily, we just closed the biggest deal in the company's history. Thank you for believing in me." She smiled, remembering the meeting where it had all begun. Who would have thought that moment of humiliation would turn into the greatest opportunity of her life? Back in the United States, Margaret was packing her bags with excitement. "Mom, are you sure you want to move to London?" "Sweetheart," Margaret said, folding a blouse, "at 62, I'm finally going to see Europe. Of course I want to go." "But what about your friends here? Your life?" Margaret stopped packing and looked at her daughter. "Emily, my life is wherever you are. Besides," she added with a mischievous smile, "that doctor in London seems very interesting. Who knows, maybe I'll find myself an English boyfriend?" Emily laughed and hugged her mother. "You're amazing." "I learned from you," Margaret said. "You taught me it's never too late to start over." On the day of departure, Richard went to the airport to say goodbye. "Emily," he said as she approached the check-in counter, "I'll never be able to thank you enough." "You don't have to thank me," she replied. "You earned every opportunity you got." "I want you to know something," Richard said. "Every day I remember how I treated you, and every day I work to be a better person than that." "I know," Emily said, "and that's why I entrusted the company to you." They hugged, and for the first time, it was an embrace between equals, between two people who had grown through their shared experiences. "Take good care of the company," Emily said. "Take good care of London," Richard replied. A year later, Emily was in her London office when she received an email that made her smile. It was a photo of Richard holding a Best Company to Work For award from New York City. The caption read, "Learned from the best." Margaret walked into the room just then, radiant after a physical therapy session. "Sweetheart, how was your meeting with the Japanese delegation?" "Excellent," Emily said. "We closed the deal for the Asia expansion." "How wonderful!" Margaret sat in the chair across from her daughter's desk. "You know I'm so proud of you, right?" "I know, Mom." "And you know that making that decision in that meeting was the bravest thing you've ever done." Emily thought back to that day, over a year ago, when she had decided to speak French for the first time in the boardroom. "At the time it didn't feel brave," she said. "It felt desperate." "The best decisions sometimes come from desperation," Margaret said wisely, "but it takes courage to act on them." That evening, Emily was reviewing a report when her phone rang. It was Richard, calling from New York City. "Emily, sorry for calling so late," he said, "but I wanted you to be the first to know." "Know what?" "I proposed to Jennifer," Richard said, referring to the HR coordinator he had hired. "And she said yes," Emily smiled. "Richard, that's wonderful news. Congratulations." "Thank you," he said. "And Emily, I was wondering if you'd agree to be my best woman at the wedding." Emily was touched. "Of course I will." "Great," Richard said, "because the wedding's going to be in London. We want to get married in the city where you're building your dreams." 6 months later, Emily stood as the best woman in the garden of a London hotel, watching Richard marry Jennifer. She reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. During the party, Miller approached her. "Emily, I need to tell you something," he said. "What is it?" "The company has decided to open a permanent office in the United States, and we'd like you to lead this expansion." Emily felt her heart race. "Does that mean—" "It means you can go home whenever you want while keeping all the international opportunities you've built here." Emily looked at her mother, who was dancing with an English gentleman she'd met at the medical center, and at Richard, who was twirling Jennifer on the dance floor. "Can I give you an answer next week?" "Of course," said Miller. "But may I ask why?" Emily smiled, watching her chosen family celebrating around her. "Because some decisions are too important to make alone," she replied. The following week, after much discussion with Margaret and Richard, Emily made her decision. She would return to the United States to lead the expansion, but maintain strong ties with London. On the day of her return to New York City, 2 years after leaving, a crowd awaited her at the airport. Richard had organized a welcome with all the employees of the American company. "Welcome back, boss," said Richard, hugging her. "Thank you for holding down the fort," Emily replied. "Actually," Richard said with a mysterious smile, "I have a surprise for you." He led her to a car, and they drove downtown. When they stopped, Emily saw a modern building with a sign that read, "Parker Global Consulting, U.S. Headquarters." "Richard, what is this?" "Your new home base," he said proudly. "We used the company's profits to buy the building. Now you have space for all the expansion you've planned." Emily was speechless. Tears of gratitude and joy streamed down her face. And there's more, Richard continued. Something else to show you. They went up to the top floor of the building, where Emily found a luxurious office, but that wasn't what caught her attention. On the wall was a photo from that first meeting with all the investors and a plaque that read, "Where it all began, the power of courage to show who we truly are." Richard, I wanted you never to forget that moment of humiliation turned into the greatest victory of your life, he said. And that your courage didn't just change your life, it changed mine too. That evening, Emily was in her new office working late when Margaret appeared with a cup of tea. "Sweetheart, you should be celebrating, not working," Margaret said. "I know, Mom," Emily replied, "but there's so much to organize." Margaret sat across from her daughter's desk and watched her for a moment. "Emily, do you remember what I told you that night when you were deciding whether to accept the investor's offer? You said I'd be a fool not to take it," Margaret laughed. "Exactly. And today, I want to tell you something else." "What, Mom?" "I called you a fool back then, but now I see you always knew exactly what you were doing." Margaret took her daughter's hand. "You didn't take that first offer because of me, but it ended up creating something even greater." "How so?" "If you'd left that day, Richard would never have had the chance to change. Dozens of employees would never have found a worthy workplace, and you would never have built your own company the way you wanted." Emily pondered her mother's words. "Sometimes," Margaret continued, "the best opportunities come disguised as sacrifices, and you've always known how to recognize them." 3 years later, Parker Global Consulting had become one of the country's leading firms. Emily was in her office reviewing proposals when her assistant informed her she had visitors. To her surprise, it was Brown, Lee and Miller, the same investors who had changed her life years ago. "Gentlemen," she said, standing to greet them, "what a pleasant surprise." "Miss Parker," said Mr. Miller, "we have a proposition for you." "Another one?" Emily laughed. "We want to offer you a global partnership," said Mr. Brown. "We want you to lead our operations in Latin America. This would make you our youngest global partner," added Mr. Lee. Emily sat down, absorbing the magnitude of the proposal. "Gentlemen, I'm honored," she said, "but I have to ask, why me?" "Because," said Mr. Miller, "in all our years of business, we've never seen anyone transform not just their own life, but the lives of everyone around them, the way you did." "Your story has become legendary in our circles," said Mr. Brown, "the secretary who changed the business world." "You didn't just change your own fate," said Mr. Lee. "You also changed someone's heart." Emily thought of Richard, who now managed the US branch with competence and humility. "I need to discuss this with my team," she finally said. "Of course," said Mr. Miller. "Take all the time you need." After the investors left, Emily called Richard for a meeting. "They want you to lead global operations?" he asked, impressed. "Yes," said Emily, "but that means I'd have to travel constantly, spend months out of the country. And what's the problem? Richard, this company is my life. New York City is my home. My mother." "Emily," Richard interrupted, "you're doing the same thing you did 3 years ago." "What do you mean?" "You're limiting your own opportunities because of other people," he said. "Your mother is doing great. I can manage the US branch perfectly, and you were born for bigger things." "But no buts," Richard said firmly. "You taught me that sometimes we need the courage to accept changes that scare us. Now it's my turn to teach you that." That night, Emily had a long talk with Margaret. "Mom, I don't know if I should accept." "Because of me?" Margaret asked. "Not just that. Everything. This company. The life I've built here." Margaret held her daughter's hands. "Emily, 6 years ago you were a humiliated secretary. Today you're a respected international executive. Do you think you should stop here?" "It's not stopping, it's being afraid," Margaret said gently. "And it's okay to be afraid. But don't let fear keep you from flying even higher." "What if I fail?" "Sweetheart, you've already proven you can do anything," Margaret said. "The question isn't whether you can. The question is, do you want to?" Emily reflected on her mother's question all night. The next morning, she called Mr. Miller. "I've made my decision," she said. "And?" "I accept," Emily said, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. Excellent, said Mr. Miller. Welcome to the global team, partner. 6 months later, Emily was in her new office in Miami coordinating operations in 12 countries. Margaret had decided to join her, saying it was time to see the world. Sweetheart, Margaret said, walking into the office with a newspaper. Have you seen this? It was an article about Richard, who had been named Executive of the Year in the United States for his innovative and people-focused leadership. He deserves it, Emily said, smiling proudly. Did you know he created a scholarship program for employees' children? I didn't know that. And a re-employment program for people over 50, Margaret continued. He's really making a difference. Emily felt her heart warm. Knowing Richard was multiplying the good he had learned was more rewarding than any personal success. That afternoon, she received a call from him. Emily, I have news, Richard said excitedly. What? Remember Jennifer, the cleaning staff member who was always mistreated by the old manager? I remember. She just graduated with a business degree through the scholarship program we created, and I want to offer her a promotion. Richard, that's wonderful. It is, he said, and it's all because of you. You showed me that when we give people opportunities, they surprise us. You were the one who chose to learn and change, said Emily. I just planted a seed. A seed that changed an entire forest, Richard replied. 2 years later, Emily was speaking at an international leadership conference when she noticed a familiar face in the audience. It was a young woman, about 25 years old, who reminded her so much of herself years ago. After the talk, the young woman approached. Dr. Parker, she said nervously. My name is Amanda. I work as an administrative assistant, and I've always dreamed of working in international business, but I never had the opportunity. Emily smiled, seeing her own story repeating. Amanda, tell me your story, she said. I graduated in international trade, speak English and Spanish, but I could only get a job as an assistant because I need to support my younger siblings, Amanda explained. My boss is not so different from how yours used to be. Emily felt a wave of déjà vu. Amanda, would you like to work at my company? Amanda's eyes filled with tears. It would be a dream, but I can't leave my current job. My siblings depend on me. What if I guarantee we'll take care of that? Emily asked. Health insurance for your whole family, scholarships for your siblings, a salary 3 times what you earn now? Amanda nearly fainted. Dr. Parker, is this real? It is, Emily said, because I believe in giving opportunities to people with potential, even when they don't believe in themselves. 3 months later, Amanda was working on Emily's team, coordinating projects for Latin America. Her transformation was as dramatic as Emily's had been years before. Dr. Parker, Amanda said one day, how can I ever thank you for all this? By doing the same thing I did, Emily replied. When you're in my position, find someone like you were and give them the opportunity you had. It's a promise, Amanda said. That evening, Emily was in her Miami apartment when she received a surprise video call. It was an unexpected gathering organized by Margaret. On the screen appeared Richard and Jennifer, now married with twins, Mr. Miller, Mr. Brown, Mr. Lee, and even employees from the American company. Emily, Richard said, we wanted to share some news. What news? Your story has become a book, Margaret said, appearing on the screen, and all the proceeds will go to a student scholarship fund. What do you mean? The publisher wants to tell your story as an example of perseverance, Mr. Miller explained. The secretary who changed everything. We've already translated this story into 5 languages, said Mr. Lee. Et nous avons créé une fondation en votre honneur, added Mr. Brown. Emily was moved. You all did this without telling me? Because we knew you'd say it wasn't necessary, Richard said. But it is. People need to know it's possible to change their lives no matter where they start. And that sometimes, Margaret said, the biggest transformations begin in the hardest moments. 5 years later, the Parker Foundation had awarded over 1,000 scholarships, and Emily's story was shared in universities worldwide as an example of how the courage to show up can change everything. Emily was in her Miami office when she received a letter that made her smile. It was from a young woman in France who had read her book and found the courage to speak fluent French in a meeting, transforming her career. Dr. Parker, the letter read, your story taught me that our talents only have power when we have the courage to show them. Thank you for inspiring me to stop hiding. At that moment, Emily realized her greatest achievement wasn't her professional success, but the chain of transformations her courage had set in motion. She picked up the phone and called Amanda, who now ran the office in Mexico. Amanda, have you found someone for our next opportunity? I have, Amanda replied excitedly. A young Bolivian woman who speaks 4 languages and works as a cleaner but has a degree in international economics. Perfect, said Emily. Let's change another life. Actually, Amanda said, we're going to change the world, one person at a time. Emily hung up and looked out the window, watching the sunset over Miami. She thought back to that meeting years ago when she'd found the courage to speak French for the first time. A moment that lasted mere seconds had not only changed her life, but also the lives of dozens around the world. Her assistant walked in. Dr. Parker, your mother called. She wants to know if you'll be home for dinner tonight. Emily smiled. At 68, Margaret had become one of the most beloved figures in the Brazilian community in Miami, organizing events and helping other immigrants. Tell her I'll be there, Emily replied, and that I have good news to share. What news? Forbes wants to do a feature on women who've transformed the business world, Emily said, and I'll be on the cover. Dr. Parker, that's incredible. You know what's even more incredible, Emily said. Knowing none of this would have happened if I hadn't found the courage to speak French in that meeting. That evening, during dinner, Margaret raised a toast. A toast to my daughter, she said, who taught me it's never too late to start over, and that sometimes the greatest opportunities come disguised as tough moments. A toast to you, Mom, Emily replied, who taught me that true love means encouraging someone to fly, even if it means being left behind. And a toast, Margaret said, tears in her eyes, to that meeting where it all began, where my daughter decided to stop hiding and show the world who she truly was. They clinked glasses, and Emily knew her story was just beginning. Because when we have the courage to show our talents, we don't just change our own lives, we change the world around us, one person at a time. And it had all started with 3 simple words in French that changed everything forever. The end. Now, tell me what you thought of the story. Have you ever been in a similar situation at work? Do you know someone who found the courage to show their talents when they least expected it? Share your honest thoughts and experiences in the comments. Thank you for joining us this far. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other inspiring stories like this one.